It's not good enough anymore just to have a strong profitable model. You need to have a strong purpose. If you don't have a strong purpose, you're not going to attract talent, you're not going to attract customers. And I actually believe it's the collective purpose of enterprise that will make a glorious future for us. Anybody that claims they know what the future looks like beyond the next 10 years have no idea what we're talking about. I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see a Cambrian explosion of jobs, of creativity, of uses of these technologies. Beyond that, I think it's very difficult to predict. But what I do know is the future hasn't been created yet. And it's actually up to you, business leaders, decision makers, to make sure that we're using these technologies for good. And I believe genuinely it's the collective purpose of an enterprise that will make this future better. But there are two definitions of AI. The first definition is getting computers to do things that humans can do. So over the past 10 years, we've managed to get machines to do things that traditionally only human beings can do. Recognize objects and images, corresponding natural language, and because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, when we get machines to do things that humans can do, we assume that that's intelligence. I would argue that humans are not intelligent. That's a different talk. There's actually a much better definition of intelligence. So instead of using human beings as the definition, there's this, which is a beautiful definition: goal-directed adaptive behavior. Goal-directed in the sense we're trying to route our vehicles to maximize deliveries, or allocate our staff to maximize learning development, or allocate our marketing funds to maximize reach, whatever. You have to have a goal, and it's usually a complex goal you're trying to achieve. Behavior is how quickly you can answer that question. Now, we've just discovered if you use the wrong algorithm, it will take longer than the age of the universe. If you use the right algorithm, it will take seconds or milliseconds. The key word, though, in this definition is adaptive. What you want to do is build systems that can make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so that next time they make better decisions. More recently, I've been looking at AI through a different lens, so its applications. Over the past few decades, new algorithms, compute, data has now allowed us to do very interesting things. And I think there are 6 categories, 6 applications of AI. The first application is task automation. Now, task automation gets a bad reputation in the AI community. It's using very simple algorithms, macros, if-then-else statements to essentially free people up from doing mundane tasks, repetitive tasks, and freeing them up to do more interesting things. Whilst these technologies are simple, the fact is that they can drive a massive amount of value in the business. Okay, so we should acknowledge them. The second category is content generation. So this is ChatGPT and DALL-E, and everybody now will be able to generate content. It could become a commodity. The one idea I want you to take away with you today is a concept called brand brains. So I'm in WPP, they produce a quarter of the world's content for brands. What you need to do is you need to build a brain, train a brain on your brand based on all the assets, tone of voice, style guides, all that kind of stuff, and glue that brain on top of these different models so that when a creative or whoever is asking a question of the language model, the brand brain contextualizes it, and if I say, for example, create me an image of a cat holding a soft drink in space, if I'm talking about the Coca-Cola account, it knows that it needs to have Coca-Cola and all that kind of stuff. So brand brains are going to be very important. They're going to allow companies to create very specific contextualized content. The third, I used to say a year ago, this was about taking human beings that are the interface and replacing it by things that look and behave exactly like a human being. So this would be like call centers, even salespeople. But now I want to talk about a concept called audience brains. So I can create content, but what I want to do is I want to show that content to my target audience and understand how they perceive that content. It used to be, 2 years ago, that all we could do is spot that that's a cat and that's a soda and that's space. But you, when you look at a piece of content, you create a complex narrative in your mind that's nostalgic and exciting. And what we need to do is correlate that narrative that you create in your mind with clicks and sales. And now AI can do that, so we can build audience brains that essentially represent the same narrative that you create in your mind. So what's exciting about this is you can also build responsible brains. So I can build a brain that is trained on a newspaper or a political party or a legal system or a minority group or a culture, and I can show that content to those council of responsibility brains, and they can tell me whether I'm infringing any laws or any cultural norms, and they can essentially guide me to make sure that I'm creating content that's awesome. The fourth category is, I guess, what everybody's been excited about over the past 10 years, which is using machine learning to extract insights from data. You already know by now that by giving human beings more insights, it doesn't necessarily lead to better decisions. However, these technologies are amazing because they can help us not only extract insights from data, they can explain how those insights exist, and they can help us understand the world in new and exciting ways. The fifth category, we've already talked about decision making, using complex algorithms to solve these massive problems. And I would argue that you get the biggest real win of applying these types of technologies to your business right now. The final category, human representation. Again, a year ago I'd be talking about exoskeletons, I'd be talking about cybernetics, I'd be talking about building your digital twin in the metaverse that represents you. Just to give you an insight in how we use this concept, we build digital representations of employees. So I would take all of your data and I would build a brain that represents you, and I would then ask that brain, if I put you on this team, will you work well? If I put you on this project, will you develop your career? So you can actually build a representation now of your employees or anybody and have that help make better decisions. Ethics is a study of right and wrong. And what happens is that we have an intent. Our intent is to maximize profit or to maximize career development or whatever. And then what we do is we build a technology, a solution that tries to achieve that intent. Now the problem with these technologies is sometimes they overachieve their intent and it causes problems elsewhere. So going back to staff allocation, we worked with a client whose objective was to maximize utilization, billable hours. We were able to build an algorithm that significantly maximized billable hours, but people were driving longer distances to clients, they were not getting enough time to train, so it caused an adverse effect. People were essentially churning. So you need to make sure that the objective function is holistic. But the human beings create the intent, not the AI. AIs do not create intent, and it's the intent that needs to get scrutinized from an ethics perspective. Sometimes the AI overachieves its intent, like it did with utilization, and it causes problems. Sometimes it doesn't achieve its intent because it's biased or it hasn't been tested properly, and I would argue they are not ethical problems, they are safety problems. So let me give you maybe a better example. So imagine you are on the board of a ride-hailing company, like an Uber or whatever, and you say, we need to maximize our revenues, so we're going to build an algorithm that sets prices. Now that algorithm has access to lots of data, and what you realize and discover is that when it accesses people's battery data, and when your battery is very low, you're willing to spend more money on your ride. So essentially you're vulnerable, and it is exploiting a vulnerability. Now the AI isn't making any ethical decisions, all it's doing is achieving its intent. Your intent. You, as on the board or an ethics committee, need to say, am I comfortable with you being exploited because you're vulnerable, or should I prioritize rides because you are vulnerable, or should I find rides that have charges in them? It's the intent that needs to get scrutinized from an ethics perspective. And one of the key ingredients for innovation is motivation. There's a very good book by a guy called Dan Pink. He said there are 3 things that motivate people: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is giving people the freedom to do what they want, mastery, the ability to become really good at what they want, and purpose is giving them something higher to align themselves with. So what we do in my company, we use the same types of technologies to understand our customers and actually understand our employees. So we take all of our digital footprint of our company and then create these digital maps of our employees. I can identify, for example, if one of these 2 people leave, I get a silo in my company. I can identify people who you go to for advice or feedback. Again, I can identify secret lovers in the company. It does raise lots of interesting ethical questions, but the principle here is that what you want to do is create a liquid workforce so you can allocate them much more flexibly to a rapidly changing world.